Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lydia Olson, and I'm the technical specialist for the Massachusetts Rivers Alliance. Welcome to the Rainwater Readiness 2025 Stormwater Workshop webinar series. This webinar series offers information about grant and load programs that are available to be utilized for stormwater management projects by managers for municipalities, nonprofits, and other organizations that may be considering such projects in the future. We also will be talking about other things related to stormwater projects like green infrastructure, which Kate will be talking about today. For our Stormwater Workshop webinar series topics and schedule, please visit the Mass Rivers Alliance website. We are still adding sessions to the series, so we recommend that you check the site frequently for the latest information. You will also find all of the information and recordings for the in-person session of this series, which took place the last week of September, in our previous Stormwater Workshop series in 2023. Today's webinar will be discussing creative ways to implement green infrastructure. Please mark your calendars for the next webinar, which is next Thursday, October 30th at noon. We'll be talking about the Community One Stop for Growth platform and grants available for stormwater projects through that portal. So just a few housekeeping items. The session is scheduled to end at 1 p.m. Please put your name and affiliation in the chat. Please put your questions in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, which Mass Rivers staff is tracking, or hold them until the last 10 minutes question and answer session. And these webinars are being recorded. Recordings and any other webinar materials will be made available on the Mass Rivers website. Lastly, we ask that you please complete the evaluation survey. The survey has been crucial in helping us continue and expand the series. We'll put links to the survey in the chat and also send it to you after the webinar. And now I'm delighted to introduce our speaker today. Kate England, GIP, is Deputy Assistant Commissioner at the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection. She has a background in engineering, landscape architecture, planning, and policy, and has worked in the public sector in and around Boston for most of her career. Kate was previously the inaugural Director of Green Infrastructure for the City of Boston. Appointed in 2022 by Mayor Michelle Wu, Kate facilitated widespread implementation of green infrastructure and helped pursue the resilience goals outlined in Boston's Green New Deal. Okay, and now I will stop sharing and let Kate take it away.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. Give me just 1 second to get my screen shared. All right, somebody give me a thumbs up when you can see it.
You are all set.
All right, perfect. Thanks for the introduction, Lydia. And thank you, everyone, for joining today. I'm Kate England. I'm the Deputy Assistant Commissioner for the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection. And we're going to talk about a couple different things today. But first, I want to start with just like level setting, what is green infrastructure? All right. So in Massachusetts and in most of the developed world, we have stormwater concerns. I don't like calling them problems or issues, but things that we need to think about when we are talking about stormwater. So the first is about water quality, and the second is about water quantity. So for the majority of people on this call, I'm assuming that you've visited an urban area or a developed area at some point, and you've seen things on the ground like litter and sediment and a variety of other things. And so when it rains or snows or wintry mixes, as we get here in New England, all of those pollutants, that litter, things that you can see and things that you can't see, get washed off of the hard surfaces in our cities and towns, and they go into our storm drain system, which is made up of catch basins and pipes. And those pipes generally discharge directly to our receiving waters, so lakes and streams and ponds and Boston Harbor, with minimal or no treatment. So all those pollutants end up in our water bodies. And then the second issue is a water quantity issue. So the majority of our storm drain systems, are designed for a very specific amount of water. So to give you an example, the City of Boston storm drain system is designed to handle about 5 inches of rain over the course of 24 hours. But as climate changes and we are starting to see more frequent and intense storms, we're seeing more and more examples of times when we're getting 2 inches of rain in an hour. So our systems, unfortunately, are not designed to handle this volume of water over such a short period of time. The image there, the map that you're seeing on the screen, is from the Climate Ready Boston viewer that shows a variety of climate-related hazards. But what you're seeing on the screen right now, those areas in teal, are parts of the city where we are already seeing flooding for a 10-year, 24-hour storm event, which is not a particularly large storm event. So as you can see, we're seeing flooding across the city, and we anticipate that this will only continue over the coming 10 years, 20 years, and 50 years. So thankfully, we have green infrastructure to help us with some of those water quantity and water quality issues. So for the purposes of this discussion, green infrastructure is described as using plants and soil and other natural materials to capture stormwater and allow it to absorb into the ground. And while that water is absorbing into the ground, plants and soils are removing pollutants and capturing litter, which keeps it out of our receiving waters. So I'm going to go through a couple of examples of green infrastructure. This is probably a review for a lot of folks on this call, but who doesn't love looking at beautiful pictures? I also should have mentioned at the beginning that the majority of the photos in this presentation were taken in the city of Boston or in Massachusetts. So at the bottom of each image, you'll see the name of the location or the site, the department or entity that either owns the site or is responsible for caring for it, and then the neighborhood in the city of Boston where this site is located. Okay, so first we have rain gardens and bioswales. These are probably the green infrastructure feature that people are most familiar with. They're typically shallow, depressed areas where water is able to collect and slowly absorb into the ground. They're often planted with native plants, which means that they are providing habitat and a variety of other things. They also can be all kinds of shapes and sizes, which means they're very flexible and can be applied throughout our watersheds. We have tree pits and tree infiltration trenches. Many of you have probably walked past or over a tree pit or a tree infiltration trench and not known that that's what it was. At the surface, they look very much like a standard street tree pit. But underground, under the surface, there is a large kind of stone reservoir where water is able to collect and slowly infiltrate into the ground. But additionally, that water is in a location where tree roots can have direct access to it. The majority of our street trees, especially in developed and urban areas, do not get enough water for them to grow to their natural size or their healthy growth habit that is typical for that species of tree or plant. So having access to additional water, helps these trees, grow to their closer to their mature size, and it also gives tree roots access to air underground. City of New York did a study, probably about 5 or 6 years ago at this point, but they were trying to figure out the primary reason that their street trees were struggling and dying. And everybody assumed that it would be lack of access to water, salt spray or something from the roadway. But it turned out that the biggest issue, the common issue across all of their boroughs, was compaction. So trees were essentially living in small soil volumes that had become very compacted over the years because of people walking through tree pits. And so that lack of access to air was actually choking their tree roots. We also have green roofs and living walls. Neither of these pictures are taken in Boston or in Massachusetts, unfortunately. The image in the top left shows an apartment building that is becoming more common in Milan, in Italy. The idea here is that regardless of the floor that you live on, the goal is for you to be able to look out your window and feel that you are surrounded by nature and that you're surrounded by trees. So they're building these beautiful buildings that have, trees that are planted on, various platforms up the building. And then the image at the bottom is actually from Amsterdam, and this is a lovely example of the green roofs and living walls that they're building across the city to help reduce the amount of stormwater that is reaching the ground and then must be managed by the drainage systems. We have porous paving materials. There are many different types of porous paving materials. It used to be pretty much porous asphalt was the thing that you would see across, across parking lots and roadways and other paved surfaces. These materials function very similarly to a standard paving material in that they are ADA compliant and you can drive on them or walk on them or cycle across them or roll across them, but they allow water to pass through them. the fines in the material have been removed and created voids that water can pass through to absorb into the ground. The same for porous concrete, which you're seeing in the image on the bottom left. But there are also things like porous pavers, which if you are in a project that, supposedly a green infrastructure project, and you're trying to identify which of the pavers are the porous pavers, you can typically tell by finding the little bumps that you might see in between the pavers. Those little separators are there to keep the pavers apart from one another so that water can pass through the voids or the gaps between the pavers and absorb into the ground. Again, ADA compliant materials that are really easily deployed if you have a space where you need some kind of hard surface, but you'd like that surface to be porous. And the last that I'm going to talk about briefly is constructed wetlands and marshlands. These are exactly what they sound like. They are human-made wetlands and marshlands. They function very similar to a natural system. They can be designed and deployed in even the most dense urban areas. The two images that you're seeing on the screen are built in Dorchester, which is a very heavily developed part of the city of Boston. And these areas are wonderful because in addition to providing habitat, and just being beautiful to look at, they can manage large drainage areas. So Harambee Park, which you're seeing on the screen right now, has a drainage area that I think it's 20 or 30 acres come all to this individual location. So really wonderful features and really beautiful additions to parkland, schoolyards, and other spaces. So I've talked a lot about green infrastructure and as it relates to stormwater and water quality. But there's all of these wonderful additional co-benefits that green infrastructure features bring with them. I'm not going to read the bulleted list, but for example, I mentioned that green infrastructure features help to support the healthy natural growth of trees. So they help to increase our urban tree canopy, which also leads to cooler cities by reducing our urban heat island effect. They help to promote biodiversity in urban and developed areas where we often lose that biodiversity as we harden our surfaces. They also can help to reduce energy usage, and they improve human health, and that includes both physical and mental health. So they help with air quality issues, as well as providing access to nature, which is something that our human minds need for health and happiness. And there are also wonderful opportunities for environmental education, like this presentation today, but also with some of the signage and stuff that you'll see in future projects in this slideshow. Okay, so I'm going to talk briefly about the green infrastructure details and specifications that we assembled at the City of Boston. The reason behind undertaking this effort was that if we want to improve the quality of the design and construction and maintenance of green infrastructure, there's real value added by having everyone in a urban area or in a community using the same designs and specifications to build these features. It means that your contractors are going to get more comfortable constructing them and maintaining them. It means that your project managers and consultants and engineers and landscape architects are going to get more comfortable designing these features in a way that can be delivered so that they are easily maintainable. So there's a lot of value to having a kind of unified approach to green infrastructure within your community. So the image that you're seeing on the screen right now, this is a screenshot of Chestnut Hill Avenue in the Allston-Brighton neighborhood of Boston. The concrete bump out that you're seeing here, which is about 3,000 square feet of hard surface, was the norm for our safety improvements for intersections in Boston for many years. So we have these intersections that are large and somewhat confusing. And so in order to make them safer and to tee them off or tighten them up, we would create these bump outs that essentially served no other function other than to slow down traffic. And so looking at this project and saying, this is not what we want for the city of Boston, this is not what we want for our roadways, we did a pilot project that led to the creation of these details and specifications. So this is an image of New England Avenue, which is a roadway, a residential roadway in the Dorchester neighborhood of Boston. Look at the size of the cars to give you a sense of scale for how much pavement this is. These are quite wide roadways, which is not super common in Boston. But you can also see the size of these intersections. They're massive, and that basically we were experiencing traffic issues, speed issues. People were flying through this area, and a number of other safety-related issues. So the Boston Transportation Department did a Vision Zero project here, which was it's a traffic safety program. The idea is to reduce injuries and deaths from traffic accidents to zero. And so the project resulted in this paint and post installation that you're seeing on the screen. So these are painted lines on the roadway. And there are little flex posts, which are small plastic vertical installations that are encouraging the vehicle drivers to stay within these new painted lines. So as you can see, there's a lot of space that was created here that was no longer intended for vehicles. But the project, had these wonderful safety improvements, but people sometimes ignored the new striping and would drive right through those spaces. And so we saw this as an opportunity to take those newly created negative spaces and turn them into something positive. So this is an image of what the site looks like today. Rather than having just paint and post installation, we took those hatched areas and we converted them into bioretention, rain gardens, and bioswales. So I'm going to show you an image really quickly of what it looks like at ground level. But as you can see, the roadway is tightened up. The traffic pattern, still makes logical sense for the people using it, but the speeds are slower. There is, good visibility around crosswalks. The crossings are shorter. And now we have this beautiful added green space that helps to reduce flooding in this area. So this is what it looks like at ground level. It's just some lovely additions to the space that used to be all asphalt area. So with this goal in mind, making that project and what you just saw the norm, we undertook this long process to create details and specifications for the city of Boston. So we started by having an internal group with representatives from a bunch of different city departments all get together and identify the types of details that we wanted and the types of specifications that would be useful. So we brought together our Disabilities Commission, our Public Works Department, Transportation Department, Parks and Rec, Boston Public Schools, and the Boston Water and Sewer Commission. So we came up with this list of details and the accompanying specifications. We grouped them into categories. So there's kind of your inlet structures, that the point where water is going to enter your feature, your surface materials and other things that would allow water to pass through and also enter into those features if they were subsurface, for example. Our pretreatment measures, structures and things we wanted at the openings or the beginnings of our features to remove some of that sediment and to remove litter and other things, as well as features within the green infrastructure itself that would act as capture points for sediment and other types of litter and things. And then we also looked at the different types of elements that we would need to make these features function to control the flow of water through the features. We have details that are about, here's the overarching look for a bioswale or for a vegetated swale or a rain garden, as well as, tree planting related details. And then finally, the outflow or the overflow structures where water ultimately leaves the system if it has not absorbed into the ground. So we came up with a number of details. These were pulled from a bunch of different sources. Some of them were from previous projects that we had done, which had all been designed in different ways over the years. And some of them were from other cities, other states, details that we felt were good examples of what we were trying to accomplish in the city. Then we asked everybody to comment on it. So people started marking stuff up and gave us all of their comments. So with all the information that we received from all these wonderful folks that were part of this effort, we were able to create this finalized set of details that is now available for use. And we encourage its use, not just for city projects, but also for the public as well. So if you're doing a private project and you're designing a bioswale or a rain garden, here are details that you can use to build it or to design and then build it. We also created supporting resources that go with the details and specifications. So we found out pretty early on that a lot of people were excited about the idea of green infrastructure, but didn't really know how to design things or what they should be designing. And so we created some guidelines. It's somewhat narrative. It helps to guide you through the process of picking a site, deciding which feature you want to use, sizing it, and then picking your plant material. We also have a plant palette, which includes a number of native plant species that are well adapted to green infrastructure, which means that they can handle being inundated with water for longer periods of time. They can also handle periods of no rain. And they are, because they're native to our area, they are well adjusted to our climate, which means that they don't require extra watering or additional care outside of the standard weather patterns that we're seeing in the city. They also are pretty hardy species for the most part, because urban green infrastructure is not always the kindest environment for plants. We also have this website on the City of Boston's website, web page on the City of Boston's website, where you can access all these details, the guidelines, the plant palette, and it's open to the public for use. So this is an example of a public project in Boston. This is a Boston Public Works project. It's a neighborhood safety project. And all of these kind of hatched, these colored areas that you're seeing, that as you can see are bioretention and bioswale. Before creating these details and specifications and the policy that goes with them, all of those spaces would have just been concrete or stamped asphalt. So all of these spaces will now be green and planted and vegetated and manage stormwater, as opposed to being hard surfaces that are just generating more stormwater that has to be managed. So a couple of examples, because we all love beautiful pictures. So this is an example of a project that we installed in Nubian Square, which is in the Roxbury neighborhood of Boston. There's a series of linear rain gardens that are next to a porous asphalt cycle track. The drainage from the roadway is being captured by catch basins and then sent into a subsurface infiltration trench that's under what you're seeing at the surface. And we planted a number of trees and native species that are, as you can see, doing quite well and very happy. And this whole neighborhood used to be, an expanse of pavement with, almost no street trees and no vegetation. And now it has this beautiful green and colorful flowers that the community is helping to maintain, and they really love. This is in front of the Roxbury Public Library. So this is an example of a tree infiltration trench. We used what we think is a nice pattern for pavers to show folks that pavers and area drains can be pretty in addition to functional. So the space needed to have hard surface because they host farmers markets and events in this space. And so rather than taking all of this area and converting it to a vegetated space, we were able to create this largely subsurface feature that still manages all the stormwater in the area, and then trees that are now growing and will provide shade in the future. This is Central Square over in East Boston. There are a number of different types of green infrastructure in this installation. The folks that you're seeing in the foreground here are laying porous pavers. It's a really large park space that used to just be the park. The footprint of the park used to be that kind of oval wall that you're seeing kind of top left of this image. So we were able to expand the park space quite a bit out into what used to be a very confusing roundabout. And I'm using roundabout loosely because there were I think it's 7 or 8 roads that all come into this intersection. And it was very confusing and very difficult to navigate, and lots of pavement. So we converted this into a porous paver area. There are several of them around the park. And I want to point your attention to the trees that were planted on the top right. So we created this tree alley, very similar to what you see in Commonwealth Avenue in Boston or in a lot of European cities. So these trees, this is when they were first planted. And the next image that I'm going to show you is the after image. And it was taken about 5 years later. So massive tree growth in just a very short amount of time. This whole area, again, did not have any trees in it, 5 years earlier. And now we have these lovely, large trees that have grown and creating shade, and are actually taking up a large amount of stormwater. We sized the infiltration trenches underground to manage runoff from, I think it's a 3.5 acre drainage area. We were trying to capture the 1-inch storm. And then we upsized a little bit just for some additional redundancy. But what we have found is that the trenches are actually never reaching full capacity, and they're not overflowing into the overflow structures because we didn't account for the uptake in stormwater that the trees are doing. So the trees are uptaking hundreds of gallons of stormwater during every storm, which means the trenches are not filling up to the volume that we thought that they would, which is a really cool side benefit for us. Okay, really quickly want to talk about the importance of engaging youth and community in your projects, because I have found that my job becomes significantly easier when the public is asking for us to do this work as opposed to us always coming to them. So we did a couple of projects. The first is we did a collaboration with Boston Public Schools. We picked 5 sites across the city. The schools were all different sizes, shapes, and levels of development. So some of the schools were big with lots of open space, most of it paved, and some of them were very constrained in very urban areas. And the goal was to demonstrate for Boston Public Schools the different ways that they could integrate green infrastructure into their schoolyards, regardless of what those schoolyards looked like. So this is an example where we installed a beautiful rain garden. And then we have some bioswales and other locations. We also have forest paving. And the cover slide for this section was another of the schools where there's a large bioretention area that was installed at a site in Roslindale. We also have the East Boston Early Education Center. This is a school for K-0 to first grade students in East Boston. The principal actually reached out to us and said, hey, we have this piece of pavement that we don't use for anything. Can we do something with this? So we basically created a Google form that had photos of all the plants on the plant palette. And we asked the students to vote on which plants they thought were the prettiest and that they wanted on their site. So the image that you're seeing on the right is the result of the form that the students used to pick all their plants. And then this is the installation day where we actually had the young students at the school, as well as teachers, the principal, and their families help us do all of the planting. So really, really fun event. And apparently the students are so excited every time it rains now. They like run to the principal's office and they're like, the rain is feeding the rain garden. So it's this like lovely like amenity at their school now where the kids are thinking about rain and how it, you know, can be put to good use by putting it into a rain garden rather than having it, you know, fall onto a hard surface and go into a storm drain system. We also did a project with, actually we've done a couple of projects with the Boston Housing Authority. The Boston Housing Authority owns and operates the housing developments in the city of Boston for low-income and minority individuals. So this site, the Franklin Field Housing Development, is it's in Dorchester in Boston, and there is a teen center at this site where the teens that live in this development go for programming and activities. So over the summer, we did 6-week program where we did basic education about you know, climate change and green infrastructure and nature-based infrastructure. And then at the end of the class or the program, we had taught the young people how to design a rain garden. And then they were able to design their own rain garden, and we built it at the Housing Authority site. So you can see here the young folks are getting some training about how to install plant material. And it was just like a really beautiful event and really fun. And the rain garden is, you know, doing really well. And the teens are helping to continue with maintenance. Okay, a couple of small slides at the end here, and then I'm going to make some time for questions. But wanted to talk briefly about how we fund all of this. So everything that I just showed you, it costs money, and that's just how this works. And so we in the city of Boston recently established a stormwater fee. So a couple of reasons why you might want to consider a stormwater fee. Managing stormwater is expensive. And if you want to design, you know, green infrastructure and implement green infrastructure and have all these things, you're going to need a designated funding source to do that. You know, the way that we typically fund our stormwater improvements in cities today is either your funds come from the general fund, which is funded through tax revenue, but you're competing against schools and emergency services and a variety of other departments. And so sometimes your stormwater program is not going to get the funding that it needs to do the work that needs to be done. The alternative is, you know, maybe your utility has a sewer fee, and so you're getting a portion of that sewer fee that's being used for your stormwater projects. The problem is that residents who have more water and sewer infrastructure in their homes because they have kitchens and bathrooms tend to pay more into the sewer fee than your largest stormwater generators and your biggest polluters. So for example, a Home Depot or you know, any kind of you know, department store has a large parking lot, a large building, but they probably only have like 2 bathrooms. And so their sewer fee is very low, but the amount of stormwater that they're generating is very high. So we're trying to figure out ways to fund this in a consistent, reliable way that is a more fair and equitable way to generate the revenue, asking folks who are creating more stormwater and polluting more to pay a little bit more. And also stormwater fees are great because they use both the carrot and the stick approach. So you've got your stick in the form of your fee. So the more pavement you have, the higher your fee. but you can also have the carrot side of things, which is a credit program and a grant program. So for the way that these are typically structured is a stormwater fee is based on the amount of impervious you have. Again, more impervious, higher fee. And your credit program gives you a reduction on your stormwater fee if you are doing an activity that is helping to reduce the amount of stormwater generated, to manage the stormwater that is being generated, and to do some kind of public education around stormwater, all of which are required by our stormwater permits. We also can have grant programs, and grant programs are funded by the stormwater fee, and they are used to allow property owners to install green infrastructure on their sites. So for example, if you are a faith-based institution and you have a large parking lot, but not a lot of money, you can apply for a grant and install a bioretention area in your parking lot. So the grant program helps to encourage people to do the added thing that helps to manage stormwater. And then you can apply for a credit to reduce your fee because now you have less hard surface on your property. So a couple of things, your goals, what you're trying to accomplish should dictate how you structure your stormwater fee. If your goal is just to raise funds, you're going to want an ample defensible fee, maybe a higher fee, and clearly articulated, penalties for when you don't pay your fee. Again, this is if all you want to do is raise money so that the city or town can do the stormwater work that needs to be done. But if you're trying to get assistance from the public, then you're going to want a credit program. You're going to want a lot of different options for people. How can they help to support the city or town's stormwater work and then lower their fee? And if your goal is to just change behavior across the whole municipality and change the way we all think about stormwater and we think about water quality and we think about green infrastructure, then you're going to want a really generous credit program. Big percentages of your fee can be reduced for doing these activities. And you're going to want a grant program. Here's, funding to help you build this kind of stuff on your site. And additionally, you want to create resources and application support so that everybody is able to apply for their credits and to apply for grants so that they can all participate in this work. Okay, I'm going to pause there because I would love to make time for questions. I really appreciate you all having me today, and I hope that some of the information that I shared is helpful for you in your work. I'm going to kick it over to Lydia to manage questions and stuff, but thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Kate. That was a really cool presentation. I have some questions, but I'm going to let the other people who are attending ask theirs first. So first up from Eileen Coleman in Burlington. She has a two-part question. One is, what tree species are you using for the tree alley project or other street planting projects? And then, are there any issues with movement of the pavers by roots?
Oh, I love this question. Thank you for asking. Okay, so first we have one of the tabs on the plant palette that I showed you because it's a spreadsheet. Is a tab for tree species.
Awesome.
And so we have the tree alley is actually honey locust trees. The primary reason that they were chosen, and I want to be clear about something, this is the last time that we did a monoculture. We have moved away from planting all the same tree species because from a resilience perspective and a resistance to pests and disease issues, planting monocultures is not great practice. But the trees in the alley are honey locusts, and they were chosen specifically because honey locusts are kind of like weeds. They're very hard to kill, and they grow very quickly. And so the idea here was, in East Boston, where the city is struggling quite a bit with urban heat island and flooding issues, we wanted a tree species that would grow very quickly, uptake a lot of stormwater, and create good expansive shade very quickly. Now, just to additional comment on the don't plant monocultures thing that I said. So the city of Boston and the Office of Green Infrastructure has thought a lot about trees, like the desired aesthetic of a tree alley is that you want everything to look the same. You want that nice same like silhouette as you walk through the space. Now, there are ways to select different tree species that have similar silhouettes. So we started to create a list. I don't think it's public yet, but we started to create a list of trees of different species that have similar shapes. So if your goal is to create a uniform aesthetic through your street, but you want a resilient plant palette, that's the way to do it. So happy to talk more about that after the fact, and I'll reach out to Rachel and at OGI and see if they've advanced that palette anymore. But it's also advice or guidance that you can give to a landscape architect who's doing a planting palette for you, is that we would like different tree species that are all shaped similarly and will grow to similar heights. Your question about tree roots is amazing, because one of the biggest issues that we see from street trees that are planted in your standard tree planting, like street tree pits that are not stormwater features, is that because there's not enough water and because the subsurface is so compacted, tree roots reach for the surface because they need water and they need air. And that is why they heave your sidewalks. Green infrastructure features, because all of the things that the tree needs, the water, the air, and the soil volume is there, it's underground. Tree roots follow their normal growth habit, which means they grow laterally and down as opposed to reaching up for something they're not getting. So what we have found, not just in Boston, but across, reports from the United States, states that have implemented stormwater tree planting guidelines are seeing less damage to their roadways and to their sidewalks because the tree roots are going down and out instead of up. So it's a really fun thing.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's very cool.
additional fun fact about porous paving, because of the void space that allows water to pass through, it also allows air to pass through, which means that porous paving materials are actually better for reducing urban heat island than standard paving materials. Because urban heat island is a measure of both how warm your space is during the day and then how long it stays warm after the sun goes down. So with porous paving materials, once the sun goes down or just the air temperature comes down, that movement of air through your surface, through your porous surface, helps to cool your materials faster. So lots of really great research on this. Carnegie Mellon, I think, did a report in the last couple of years that really dug into like the different surfaces and materials we should be considering in urban areas for both stormwater and heat purposes. So lots of really wonderful, new data coming out about this, and just helps to make the case for using green infrastructure features in cities.
Wow, that's awesome. I did not know all of that.
Happy to share.
Yes, yeah, thank you. Okay, so Tyler Chase Ellison from the Charles River Watershed Association asks, do you have a price estimate for the total maintenance needed for cleaning out the porous pavers? And how often are you needing to perform routine maintenance for these hardscapes and greenscapes, respectively?
Yeah, so numbers are going to vary, which I know is an unsatisfactory answer, but um, couple things to note. So porous paving materials, the guidance for best practice for maintenance says that you should be cleaning them about 2 times a year, usually in the fall after leaf drop is over, and then in the spring to clean out all the winter gunk that has gotten in them. But what we're actually seeing nationally is that porous paving materials that are not receiving but like biannual maintenance or even annual maintenance are staying porous longer than we anticipated. So for example, a section of your parking lot is paved with porous paving. Every part of that section may not stay perfectly porous the way that it was, functioning the day it was installed. But over time, smaller sections will become clogged, but the stormwater will continue to move across the surface until it finds a location where it can go into the ground. And so, although I would not recommend not doing your maintenance, we are finding that the porous paving materials are going longer without maintenance than we thought they could. Now, assuming best practice and that we are cleaning them as they should be cleaned. We had a contract in the city of Boston with a contractor who specializes in cleaning out porous paving materials. And we had, it was like, I think it was $250,000 for the year, which we did not end up spending all of for, I think it was 20 or 30 sites. And the reason that I say price is going to vary is because the price is typically based on the square footage of impervious area that they're cleaning. It's not like a flat fee per location. It's how many square feet and how much time. So it will depend. I bet we could come up with we can look at our contract numbers and see what the per square foot amount came out to be. But what we've seen is that a lot of smaller, like paving contractors and even landscape firms are starting to purchase the equipment to do the porous paving cleaning because they make it in small form. Like it's like a floor cleaner that you like walk behind. It's essentially a vacuum and like a hydrojetting nozzle head kind of combination. So that material comes in, or that equipment comes in different shapes and sizes and dollar amounts. So we're starting to see smaller companies purchase this stuff so that they can, also get in on the porous paving cleaning game. And in the city of Boston, because the policy now requires the use of porous paving in certain installations, the demand for the install for these features goes up, which means the cost comes down over time. And the demand for maintenance goes up, which means the cost for maintenance comes down over time. So the more of this that we're using and the more that is out there, in Boston Metro or across the state, the more contractors, the more equipment and all that will be available to hire from. So your question about the vegetated maintenance. So the city of Boston did what we called the multi-pronged maintenance approach, which is our fancy way of saying that you should build redundancy into your maintenance planning. There was a maintenance contract with an ecological restoration firm, Parterre Ecological, who does standard regular maintenance for our vegetated infrastructure across the city. They typically get to each site once every 3 or 4 weeks, which is not as frequently as we would like. It would cost quite a bit more if that were the case. But what we ask them to do is focus on the more like plant and ecological restoration side of the maintenance. So look at, pruning, look at, how are the plant species that we planted performing? Where are we seeing die off and die back? And where are we having to replant? Where are we seeing that we need to thin out our vegetation? So they're doing more of the like ecological assessment side of things and the more specialized maintenance. And then we have 2 other maintenance options that we also are using at any given time. So the city of Boston has a Power Core program, which is a youth earn and learn program where the young people have identified that they want to go into a green career. And there are a couple of different pathways. One of them is urban greening, which includes green infrastructure. And so these young people are getting training about how to install and maintain green infrastructure, but their training is hands-on training out in the field. So they're maintaining the green infrastructure in the city while they're learning to do that maintenance. So the Power Core program, we do Thursdays with Power Core. So they go out on Thursdays and they do maintenance at green infrastructure across the city. That is actually no cost to the city other than the cost of the Power Core program's existence. But the maintenance that they're performing doesn't cost like OGI any money. But we're using like living classrooms essentially for their skills training. And then the third prong that we have is a volunteer program. So lots of back and forth with the city's legal department to get a waiver and trainings and other things that the city felt were protective and would ensure that people were safe when they were doing this activity in the field, and that our infrastructure, because green infrastructure is infrastructure, would be safe as well. And so, there's a virtual training and then an on-site training. The volunteers can go out whenever they are available. What we found is a lot of people wanted to volunteer, but when we were hosting volunteer events at very specific dates, times, and locations, people weren't available when we were holding the event. And so the purpose of the waiver and the trainings and everything was to allow folks to go out on their own time and do, litter removal and weeding and things like that when they had spare time. So the volunteer program, there are 20 something sites in the city that have been adopted by volunteers. We started with a small batch of locations to see how it went. Some sites are going better than others. Some of the volunteers are out there all the time. The youth programs that I mentioned, they're out there all the time. Some of the volunteers are out there, once every few weeks. But between those 3 items, the contract, the Power Core program, and the volunteer program, our features are having eyes on them once every week or so, or every 2 weeks or so. We're getting a lot of information from the public. We get photos when the green infrastructure features are damaged much faster than we would be able to get out and inspect them as part of a routine inspection program. So it's just good information for us, good engagement with the community. It reduces the amount of money that the city has to spend on the maintenance. And overall, we've got, this lovely community growing around green infrastructure in Boston. So that was a long answer, but hopefully helpful information. And if you're looking for exact dollar amounts, I'll see what I can do to get you some like numbers, like dollars per square foot for porous paving. And then the vegetation maintenance contract that we've been running is about 300,000 a year. And I think there are 30 sites. I want to say it was 30 sites that were in there last year. So a good number of sites are being covered for not an insane amount of money.
That's awesome. Yeah. And actually, it was a good long explanation because you covered a couple other questions that
Oh,
people
good.
had. So that's great.
Perfect.
But so I just want to bring up one thing which you kind of
Mhm.
already covered. So a question from someone in the chat: How does Boston manage costs and maintenance associated with maintaining porous pavement, which you already covered?
Mhm.
But I specifically wanted to bring up because they said their municipality has concerns about porous pavement maintenance due to New England snow/salt.
Yeah, that's a good one. And a question that I get often. So a couple things. One, we are not the only state with winter weather that is doing green infrastructure and porous paving installations. I strongly encourage you to look at what other states are doing. So there's a group, a network called the Green Infrastructure Leadership Exchange. It's one of several networks that exist, in the United States that consists mostly of green infrastructure professionals who work in the industry in the municipal sector only. So the membership are people who work for cities and towns who do green infrastructure installations and maintenance. So they have the same issues with, constrained budgets, with, public works and transportation departments who are resistant to change or who are like concerned about bringing a new material into their palette. They have similar issues with stormwater permits, like permit requirements, their NIPD's permits and other things that they have to meet as a municipality, but also that they have to enforce on, the public as well. Um, so really encourage folks to talk to other people, who are in, New York, and we talked to, city or town of Buffalo, city of Buffalo, like city of Buffalo and Milwaukee and Detroit and like New York City and like, other municipalities that have similar climates to what we have here. And what we have found is a couple of different things. One, salt application for porous paving materials does not need to be as frequent or in hard salt form as it is for roadway maintenance because of the porous nature of the material. When snow or things that are melting and usually sitting on a surface, on an impervious surface, and freezing and becoming ice, you don't get water that sits on the surface for a porous paving material. So once that snow melts or the rain or sleet or something comes down, it's passing through the surface and you're not getting the amount of icing that you would see on a standard concrete or asphalt or other hard surface. So from the perspective of, protecting water quality, reducing your winter maintenance requirements, porous paving is actually a really great way to reduce the amount of salt that's ending up in our watersheds and to reduce the amount of salt application that has to be done on our roadways and sidewalks and pathways. So that's one thing. And then the second thing is we have found that although the equipment is different, meaning like a regenerative air vacuum sweeper is a different machine than a standard street sweeper, they're roughly comparable in cost. And so as a municipality is replacing street sweepers or other equipment, switching over to the regenerative air sweeper, for example, which can sweep a standard street or a porous paved street, it can actually be worked into your capital cycles for people. So encouraging our municipalities that when they are doing their equipment repurchases or they're putting together contract language for their contractors who do the maintenance, if you start thinking about integrating this new type of equipment, which is used in almost the same way, it's just got different physical functions, you can do that as part of your standard equipment renewal process. And then for contractors, if we start putting the language, or when we start putting the language in our contract documents, the contractors will buy the equipment. So if they don't already have it and they're finding that they can't bid on a contract because they don't have the required equipment, they will often choose to purchase that equipment so that they are now eligible to bid on more contracts and earn more money. So just putting it out there that some of this stuff is a little chicken and egg. You know, people are like, oh, well, we can't put down the porous paving until we have the machinery. But I think if you are, approaching a public works department or approaching a water and sewer department, if they're the ones who are doing the maintenance on porous paving, and saying, let's start with a contract. You don't have to buy the equipment until you're, naturally going to be replacing your current standard street sweepers. And then once you get to that stage where you're ready to buy your new stuff, consider buying one of these. We did a demo, a porous paving demo, where we invited Public Works and Boston Transportation and Boston Parks, and a couple of other, departments, and then, private contractors as well who bid on our contracts. And we went to Nubian Square and we demoed how the equipment is used. Here's a section of porous paving. Here's what it looks like. Here's the equipment that you would need. And the contractors and the staff were able to just ask questions. So it was, a nice experience where people were like, oh, that's actually almost exactly the same thing that we do with street sweeping. And yeah, the machine looks and feels pretty much the same. It just functions a little bit differently. It was our way of trying to like bring the barriers down and like reduce the amount of anxiety around something that's perceived as new, but is really largely similar to what they already do. So I hope that's helpful information, but I will say that don't give up, because I know that, initially a lot of our city departments, they start with no, because they're strapped for budget, they're strapped for staff, they're strapped for expertise. They worry about changing what they're already doing, but don't take that initial no and then walk away. Come up with other ways to try to socialize the idea. Find some champions either within the department or in your city or town leadership that are like, yeah, this is a great idea. We should do this. Show some examples of recent disasters and floods and other things and say, every little thing that we can do to reduce the hard surface in our city and town is going to reduce the chance that we're going to have major infrastructure damage. And then we'll wish that we had spent that money earlier. So just come up with, whatever works for your particular department, your particular city or town, and don't just accept no and walk away. Like find other ways to present, helpful information that will help them come around.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Okay. And then you kind of touched on this earlier again, but Jordan Vachon, hopefully I pronounced that right, says, in your outreach, have you done any training programs for green jobs? Which you mentioned the Power Core program, but it seems like bioswale native planting maintenance is in particular will be a quickly growing industry, and I haven't seen any training resources or certifications for this.
Yeah, so there are two certifications that exist that it's called I'm a GIP, which is a National Green Infrastructure Certification Program license. The certification is specific to construction and maintenance of green infrastructure. It does not cover design, but that is one license that does exist, and there are trainings available for that. The City of Boston and a couple of community organizations within Boston do offer these trainings with some regularity. So Codman Square NDC, which is the Neighborhood Development Corps, they're a nonprofit that exists in the Dorchester neighborhood of Boston, and they've been hosting NGICP trainings for years, and helping to get people certified. Additionally, the City of Boston's work with Power Core, so that's one type of job training, kind of led us into, we hosted a couple of NGICP trainings ourselves, where we just had members of the public participate in the training. It was free. The city paid for the cost of the training, the license, and the exam. And the goal was to just increase the number of people in the city of Boston that have these skills and have this expertise so that they can, get jobs at companies that we, hire all the time or start their own businesses. So that's another thing that the city does. There's also the city received, I guess, 9.8 million from NOAA like a year or so ago to start a green jobs or climate resilient jobs training program. It's called the Alliance. There's a longer name that I am not going to remember right now. But the funding from NOAA is being used to host trainings for, again, open to the public, for green infrastructure installations, for living shoreline installations, for coastal ecological restoration. So there's a variety of different skill types. So they're partnering with local universities, with companies and like accrediting boards that host or like own licenses and certifications, like Mass Certified Landscape Professional. So like there's a couple of different types of training that is being offered through that program. And again, it's a really great like low cost or like available opportunity if folks are trying to break into one of these green industries, and are concerned about, I don't have the education or I don't have the licensure. Like this is a way that they can get there without having to, go to a 4-year university or something. So there's a lot happening. There are a lot of really wonderful extension programs, part of the public university system in Massachusetts, that offer trainings and certifications in a variety of landscape and ecological restoration type fields. So I encourage folks to look into like landscape extension type programs, because there's stuff out there that's not crazy expensive, and some of it is free, and they're going all the time. It's something that I think is one of the best parts about Massachusetts.
That's wonderful. Yeah, that's great to hear for sure. So we are at 1 o'clock. So I know some
Oh, sorry.
people will need to leave right at 1. Kate, if you have a few more minutes to stay on, I'd love to just get the last couple questions answered so we can
Yeah.
have it for the recording. And anyone else who wants to hear the answers, you're welcome to stay. But I know a lot of people have tight schedules. So of course, if you need to leave, please do. Okay, so just the last two questions we
Hmm.
have. Eilish Corey or um Eilish, sorry, from the town of Wellesley, who I know just implemented their own stormwater utility recently. She's asking how much money is being offered for the private green infrastructure grants through your stormwater utility program.
Yeah, so currently it's not enough. So full disclosure, so we're trying to convince Boston Water and Sewer Commission to consider higher grant amounts, because
Hmm.
currently it's a match. And the reason
Oh,
that the
okay.
dollar amount is low is because everybody who applies gets it. So
Mm,
just so that you're aware, it's like the homeowner or property owner puts in, an amount of money, Boston Water and Sewer matches it, and everybody gets that money. The other cities and towns that we have looked at across the country that have grant programs that are more substantial, the highest that I've seen, I want to say, is maybe it's like the Southern Ohio Sewer District. They do like,
oh,
it's like 500,000 or something is like the max grant
wow.
amount. Yeah, so they
Dang.
have like big like dollar amounts that are available. And
Okay.
then other municipalities do things in the 25 to $50,000 range. That's much more common. So my hope is that we can, establish a system that allows for 25 to $50,000 grants for the, stormwater fee in
Mhm.
Boston. Um, but like, we also have a couple of alternative options, like the MVP program, which is a state program, offers, up to a couple million. So like
Oh, wow.
there's
Okay.
a couple of different ways that you can apply for grant funding for stormwater and like green infrastructure projects, that have much higher dollar amounts than are currently available in Boston. Like I said, goals for the future. And we're trying. I don't know if the other, because there are 25 or 30 Massachusetts municipalities that have stormwater fees right now. And I
Hmm.
don't know if anybody has a particularly high dollar amount grant program. I'll have to look into it. But there are a couple of programs or stormwater fees in Massachusetts where their credit program is really expansive. So like Northampton has a really wonderful grant program or credit program, sorry, that offers credits for a wide range of activities. And I think they have grants as well. So I think MAPC, Metropolitan Area Planning Commission, yeah, has a report that they put out recently that has information about the stormwater fees in Massachusetts. And I know a couple of other organizations have them as well. So I'd say take a look at one of those reports and see if anybody's got a grant program that's, giving out higher dollar amounts, and reach out to them and like find out how they put that through. But from what we've seen in like Philly and a couple of other places, the grant program makes a huge difference and like has resulted in people building large infrastructure projects that probably wouldn't have happened otherwise.
Yeah, it seems like a really great program for sure. And I know Martin Pillsbury from MAPC is on here, so maybe he can throw in the link to their stormwater utility publication.
Actually, I already did. It's in the chat.
Thank
Oh, okay,
you.
wonderful. Thank you, Martin.
Yes, it was a survey of a few different towns in Mass and then out of state, but it was 2018, and
Okay.
so take that with a
Things
grain of
have
salt.
probably changed a little,
Okay.
Yeah,
but yeah.
yeah.
But there are others out there too that I'm sure we can track one down.
Yes. All right, great. Thanks so much, Martin. Okay, and then last question from Chris Doyle. Have you seen use of porous pavement, specifically not pavers,
Mhm.
on bike paths, recreational surfaces, or road/driveways?
Yep. So we've got several in Boston, porous asphalt and porous concrete that's been
Okay.
used. So Central Square has porous concrete and porous asphalt. Public Alley 543 is public asphalt or porous asphalt. Codman Square Park in Codman Square has porous paving. We're starting to use resin-bound stone, which I didn't talk about directly, but essentially it's stone aggregate that's rolled in an epoxy resin. And
Oh.
it's used most often in tree pits, but it can also be
Mhm.
used, for pathways and parks. There's some in Codman Square, and as well a couple of other parks projects that are coming out, and some of them I think are in construction now. So we do have a bunch of examples across the city of Boston. A section of the Connect Historic Boston bike path is porous asphalt. And there's a section of I-93 in Maine, I want to say, or New Hampshire. Maybe it's New Hampshire, that's porous asphalt. So
Huh.
yeah, so there's lots of examples of porous asphalt and porous concrete that's been used in very high traffic urban areas.
Hmm.
So I would be happy to. I think actually, if you go to the City of Boston website, we have a map. It's called Visit Green Infrastructure, but it's on the Office of
Cool.
Green Infrastructure webpage. And there's like 20 sites or something that are highlighted, and you can click on them. There are photos, but it also indicates which ones have porous paving, porous asphalt,
Mm.
that kind of stuff. So feel free to click through there and then just pop out and go see them because they're all public locations.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds really cool. I'll have to go do that.
Yeah. Oh, City Hall
Um,
Plaza. Sorry,
oh,
City Hall Plaza outside of City Hall has a bunch of resin bound stone, and yeah. So
very cool.
anyway, lots of sites that you can go see.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Okay. All right. So that looks like that's all the questions. Thank you everyone for staying a little later. And of course, thank you, Kate, for
You're
your
welcome.
wonderful presentation and answering all of these great questions. And yeah, hopefully this will be a good impetus for some other places to also start helping them implement their green infrastructure as well. So thank you everyone and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.